And we're live. Hey everyone, welcome to Insight.net. My name is Celso Phillip, and I know some of y'all have been messaging me, and I promise I am going to change the timer. I'm not going to use the default timer. I will change it, I promise. So just give us a little bit, and we'll get the graphics and all that stuff sorted out. But thank you all again for joining us. If this is your first time here, welcome again to Insight.net. This is where we kind of have a free open space to talk about all things .net. So we like to have guests from around the community that have various projects and companies and just different types of interests, talking about like some of the cool things that they're, really passionate about. And today, my friend Shaun is here. And for those of you that don't know Shaun, and we'll have him do some introductions in a second. Shaun's here. He's going to be talking to us about Oqtane, and particularly the Oqtane Marketplace, which is using features from Blazor, from .NET MAUI, from Stripe. And so I'm really super interested to kind of learn about what's happening there. But Shaun, I'm going to give you a second. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what do you do?
All right. I'm Shaun Walker. I am currently the founder of a consulting company called DevEssence and also a product company called Oqtane Labs. Actually just started these ventures about 3 months ago. So it's interesting just getting started with bootstrapping a startup again. I've done this in the past, then went and worked in large enterprise for a while. And it's actually kind of refreshing to be back to being independent again. I guess my claim to fame is that I was the original creator of .NET Nuke, which was a very popular open source content management system and application framework based on .NET Framework. So going back like a couple decades now, that was an interesting journey, managing that open source project, then later commercializing it, raising venture capital. I kind of parted ways with that venture in 2014, and then had various interests and worked in consulting for a while, and ultimately found Blazor in about, I guess, 2017, 2018, when it was still in a very early stage, not even a 1.0 stage, and saw the potential for the really strong component model that it has, and decided that I would like to build another framework built on .NET Core and Blazor, and ultimately that became Oqtane. So it's been a big focus of my life now for like the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm really glad to see that it's starting to pick up momentum, both the product that I've created, Oqtane, but also Blazor itself. It seems like there's a lot of momentum behind it, and people are really excited for .NET 8.
So Shaun, I definitely want to talk about Oqtane, but I got to ask you a personal question first.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned you built .NET Nuke, and I remember .NET Nuke a while ago, and that was like it's almost like a CMS framework, almost a little bit, right? Like as to build .NET stuff. And then now you're onto your second framework. Like there has to be something inside of you. Like there has to be some type of energy in you that's like you are a builder. You know what I mean? Like you're a builder.
Yeah.
I feel like there's an energy that kind of drives you to do it. Like where do you think you get that from?
Yeah, I've been asked this question a lot over the years, and I seem to never have a great answer for it. But right from my earliest experiences in being a software developer, I always gravitated towards building reusable components or reusable libraries, reusable frameworks. And I like to say it's because I'm lazy, and I don't like writing things over and over again. Like I like writing things once and then reusing them. And then I also like maintaining applications that have sort of a very consistent and familiar, feel to them, as opposed to brand new code bases every time. And so frameworks do provide those benefits, and maybe that's why I've sort of tackled this area multiple times now. I also think that, there's a lot of developers out there who also don't like building the same thing over and over again, right? They like focusing on the value added things they can bring. And so I hope that they also have been able to get value out of the platforms and frameworks that I've developed over time.
And it's not only that you've built these frameworks and these tools, but like you've created companies around it. right? Like you're creating businesses around it. And I think that's an important thing to highlight too, because a lot of folks are like, oh, I'm building an open source thing. Like, how can I make my passion my, the thing that feeds my family, that pays for my mortgage and, sends my kids to school. And I think you're such a great example of someone that's doing some of that stuff. You haven't done it once, you did it twice, and you're probably going to do it maybe a couple of more times, right? Because again, like I said, like I feel like you're a builder, right? Like, and you have that energy inside of you. If for folks that are listening, and this is going to be the last question before we actually dive into Octane. For folks that are listening and they're like, hey, I have a project, I have an idea, I have a thing that I'm building, and it's on GitHub or Bitbucket or CodeLab or whatever folks are using, and I want to make a business out of it. Like, do you have any really quick advice that you want to share with those folks?
I have a lot of advice, but I don't know if it's quick. Actually, I did a presentation on specifically the open source sustainability topic for the last .NET Foundation Summit, which was a couple of weeks ago, and the recording is available online. So I did a pretty in-depth discussion about the things that you need to think about if you're an open source developer or maintainer and you want to sort of take your project to that next level. And it's interesting, right? Because some of the decisions that you make very early on are the ones that are going to either allow you to probably be successful or maybe hold you back in terms of realizing what the true potential of that project is. So I tried to really lay out like the different business models that are possible, because there isn't like one single business model that works for every open source project. But just tried to frame the whole problem space in terms of the things you should be thinking about if you want to, commercialize your open source project and maybe provide some kind of a revenue stream so that you can focus more of your time on it.
Right. So for folks, if y'all are building your projects, if you have any ideas, message Shaun. He might have some good advice for you, right? Like, I'm sure you can reach out to him on LinkedIn and the Twitters and stuff like that.
Yep, you bet. Yeah, I'm happy to chat with folks if they are interested in getting some advice on what the next steps might be.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk about Oqtane. Now, you created Oqtane, like you said, a couple of years ago, over 4 or 5 years ago, right? As like a modular Blazor Razor framework, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Now, what you're here to talk about today is something a little bit different, right? And it's Oqtane's Marketplace. So
right.
Tell me, like, what is that? Like, how is that separate from the main Oqtane? Like, what does it add? Like, what's the opportunity there for us as developers?
Yeah. So the whole idea behind these frameworks is that they, much like, the Microsoft-based frameworks, even the Blazor framework itself, right? It's a tool that you can utilize to build applications on top of. And that's essentially what .NET Nuke was, and that's essentially what Oqtane is as well. So the idea there is, the platform provides you with extensibility points that you can then build your own custom applications and leverage the capabilities that the framework provides. There's a lot of people who use these frameworks to build internal applications. They might even build commercial applications based on, an open source framework. Or some of these applications, though, are useful to more than just one client. And so in that case, there is always an opportunity to essentially commercialize them so that you could become maybe an ISV, right? And sell your applications to users of the platform so that they can benefit from that extra functionality. And so .NET Nuke had a very vibrant marketplace around it with hundreds of different vendors that had products that they made available for sale, and consumers would then purchase those products and they would integrate seamlessly and they would get a lot of additional functionality without having to build it from scratch themselves. So that's sort of the value proposition of any platform. And in order to do that, you have to have a really robust platform. And so that's why it's taken this long with Oqtane to get to this point where I felt it was, at a stage where it could actually support a marketplace type of environment. Modularity and the deployment kind of capabilities were always there from Oqtane from the very beginning, but the platform itself has to become mature enough, like that developers are willing to actually build stuff on it. And I think that's where it is today.
So, so what you're saying now is that like there's gonna be this place that we could go to as developers, and one, I could be a consumer, right? Like I could make use of some of these components, and I'm guessing like they'll be searchable and there'll be tags and there'll be all this other
Yep.
types of stuff. But I'm guessing there's also that opportunity for us to build some stuff, right? And I think not only that
Right.
is such an interesting idea from a business perspective, but again, talking about .NET, right? Like I think .NET needs more of these types of opportunities, right? And more of these types of examples of showing folks how we could write these different components, right? Because I see them in other languages, right? I see other folks, languages I won't name, that are doing some of these types of things, and they're generating revenue for a lot of folks, right? So I think this is a great example for us.
Yeah, so essentially the platform itself, because it's open source and freely available, becomes the enabler so that people can build applications. And then it becomes almost like a sales channel as well, because people can find your extensions through the platform. They can purchase them, they can integrate them really easily. So it kind of creates this like nice virtuous circle. Um, or at least, that's the theory behind it. I think it's interesting because if I think back to like the .NET Nuke ecosystem and the commercial extensions that were built there, a lot of the vendors that built extensions were actually from countries that you wouldn't expect, right? Like countries where if you sold a product in a US based marketplace, the value that you would receive is provides significantly more value to you, right, in the country that you live in. So there was a lot of vendors from countries that were taking advantage of the opportunity to basically create a business that could support them in their own like area. If maybe I'm not explaining this well, but hope you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So Shaun, I think you had some slides, right? Like, do you want us? Let's have us start going through.
Yeah, I can run through a few slides and then we'll jump into some demos as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, your screen is up now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about Oqtane, and we're going to talk about the marketplace and the platform ecosystem that is being created around Oqtane. I've already ran through sort of the overview of who I am. Been quite involved in the .NET community for a long time. I think the only thing I haven't mentioned here is that I'm also involved with the .NET Foundation. I'm the chair of the project committee where we review projects who are applying to become members of the .NET Foundation. I think I've already covered like what the Oqtane framework is, but I mean, from a high level, it's basically a framework that allows you to build applications much quicker using Microsoft technologies like the modern .NET and Blazor and MAUI. It's open source. It's actually a project that's a member of the .NET Foundation. And the idea with this marketplace, which I'm going to be talking about, is to build a platform ecosystem. And so the idea behind a platform ecosystem is that it allows multiple entities, right, to create and share in the value of that platform. And there's some benefits there in that it obviously provides value to the individuals who are building on top of the platform, but it provides value to the platform as well, because there is no software platform in existence that's going to be able to deliver the functionality of every single client, right? So in order to increase the value of the platform, you want individual developers to be able to recognize areas of opportunity, new ideas, innovation, and be able to bring those to the platform. And so then the platform itself doesn't need to focus on providing those, right? It provides a really strong foundation that you can build on. Obviously, as an open source project, it's important to have a revenue model that can provide some sustainability for the project in the long term. And so a marketplace provides a revenue model. And then again, of course, it creates an opportunity for entrepreneurs around the world. And this is sort of what I was getting at, is that creator economy of folks all around the world, right, who can participate in an ecosystem like this by building applications and make them available to consumers of the platform. So I had like a number of different goals that I was trying to achieve with this particular marketplace idea for Oqtane. Some of them are different than what I had done previously with .NET Nuke. So one of the big differences is I wanted to embrace sort of this app store concept. Everyone's very familiar now with, consuming applications from app stores, especially on your mobile devices, but also on the desktop. So I thought that, this concept of not having to go to some store somewhere to purchase products, but having an embedded experience within the framework itself was an important concept that I needed to embrace. And so that was one of the key goals. Another goal is clearly the framework itself is open source. And so there's always the ability for people to build open source extensions to the platform. But there should also be the ability for people to build commercial extensions as well. And those two different types of applications should coexist in the same space. This is a bit different than what we did with .NET Nuke in that we had like a DNN Forge, which was exclusively for open source applications. And then we had the Marketplace, which was for commercial. And, there's no reason why those two shouldn't coexist because they share a lot of the same capabilities, so to speak, or the same needs, same requirements in terms of being able to deliver functionality to users. I also wanted this marketplace to be full service. So not just a store where you go and purchase things, but really going beyond that and providing some of the other services that developers would need in order to be able to provide their applications to consumers. This would include things like licensing, right? So if you're a developer and you want to build an application that people can utilize, you're going to want to protect your IP. And so you're going to need some kind of a licensing solution. And of course, you could go off and roll your own. I've done that before myself, and it's a lot of time and effort to do that. And so I thought this is something that the Oqtane Marketplace could provide. In addition, of course, there's a need to provide support for commercial products. And so the marketplace should be able to provide a help desk type capability as well. And so obviously the marketplace can provide these capabilities to developers, but I also thought that it's important to not have like a full kind of lock-in strategy, right? You need to have the flexibility so that people can use other tools if they so desire. So if they want to build their own licensing solution, go ahead. If you want to build your own help desk, go ahead, right? There's no reason why you have to use the tools that are part of this marketplace. And so that was a key aspect as well. Obviously, if I'm out there promoting Oqtane, then I better build this marketplace on Oqtane as well, right? If I cannot build a full-featured marketplace on the Oqtane platform itself, then obviously that there's something wrong with the platform. So I have a picture of a dog eating dog food here. So this concept of dog fooding, right, where you eat your own dog food, right? You use your own product. And as a result of that, you often find limitations maybe in your own product that then you can address. So being a user of your own product generally provides a better outcome, not just for you, but for users of that platform as well. And I did not want to venture into trying to handle e-commerce requirements myself. I knew from the very beginning I was going to want to partner with a third-party specialized e-commerce provider. And I believe, based on my research, that Stripe is the best platform today, especially for .NET developers who are wanting to integrate e-commerce capabilities with their applications. I would say that in the past, I used PayPal a lot for this, but I don't think PayPal is providing the level of tooling or support that they used to in the past. And in fact, Stripe has really stepped up in this regard as probably, I would say, the preferred platform. And so the Oqtane Marketplace takes advantage of the capabilities of Stripe. And so I guess the whole idea here is like if you're a third-party developer and you have an idea of something that you might want to build and something that you think that others might want to utilize, really there's no limit to what you can do with a platform like Oqtane. It's just a matter of, coming up with the idea and then building it using the sort of conventions of the platform. In terms of like building Oqtane modules, because so an application that would integrate with the platform is called a module in Oqtane. It utilizes Blazor and utilizes .NET Core, and it follows basically the typical sort of client-server architectural approach that you would use for building any Blazor applications. So in this sense, it's got a dedicated client project, a dedicated server project, and a shared project where you can sort of share your models between the two. These are ultimately compiled into assemblies, and then the assemblies can be packaged into a NuGet package, which is essentially a Razor class library at the end of the day, right? It has assemblies in it, and it may have static assets in it, but it's using the standard NuGet format that everyone is familiar with for packaging applications. From a commercial licensing perspective, there is a NuGet package that's been created called Oqtane.licensing. The idea behind it is it's pretty simple to use. So you just wrap your UI code in a license view, and then that will obviously protect the content from being displayed if the application is not licensed, and it has the ability for someone to activate a license or enter a license key as well in the event that they're not using a licensed product. If you are a developer, obviously you don't want to be experimenting with building your applications in production, so it's important to have an environment that you can experiment with the commercial applications that you build. And so Oqtane does have a sandbox environment at sandbox.oqtane.net. And essentially, you just have to set a setting in your app settings.json file, set the package registry URL, and from that point on, your local environment will be pointing at the sandbox rather than the production marketplace environment. So getting more into, I guess, some of the details about building a marketplace, right? You have to identify the different types of flows that exist that you want users to follow in order to interact with your marketplace. And so the Oqtane Marketplace obviously has a sign-up flow where if you are a developer and you want to sell your products, or just even if you want to make your open source products available, you need to, of course, sign up. Currently, you can sign up with a local authenticated user account on the marketplace, or it's also integrated with GitHub, so you can actually sign in using your GitHub credentials using OAuth. Once you've signed up, then you want to provide some more information about who you are as a developer and the products that you're providing. And so in order to pay developers who are offering commercial products, we've taken advantage of the Stripe Connect capability that's part of the Stripe platform. So basically what you do is you go through an onboarding flow with Stripe where you provide information about who you are as a business. So this would include things like financial information, so you can connect it to your bank account and things like that. Oqtane doesn't deal with any of this itself. It delegates that responsibility to Stripe. And then with this Stripe Connect in place, it means that when a product is sold within the Oqtane Marketplace, the funds for that purchase can be directed to you immediately through the Stripe Connect capability. So this is a pretty powerful capability to pay vendors. Stripe also does things like issue 1099s for US-based vendors. It just has a whole lot of capabilities so that you don't have to build these types of administration aspects to your marketplace yourself. And this is a huge benefit because if I think back to the .NET Nuke marketplace, there was an incredible amount of effort that was spent on just paying vendors every month. And when I say every month, I mean the payments were like batched up and people were paid once a month, whereas with Stripe Connect, they can be paid almost immediately. So the world has definitely changed for the better in this regard by using third-party e-commerce providers like Stripe. The Oqtane Marketplace. obviously, this is at www.octane.net. There is the ability, obviously, to browse the products that have been listed in the marketplace, and you have different categories for commercial and open source, although all of these products coexist in the same marketplace. And then you can filter by theme, by module, by translation. You can do searching, you can do sorting as well. But if you're a developer and you want to list your product, then once you've obviously gone to the marketplace, you can choose this submit product button, and that will invoke the flow so that you can sign up as a developer and you can start listing your products. So there is a package registry where you provide some basic owner information. And once you've provided the owner information, it's at that point that you can then start the Stripe Connect flow so that you can sign up through Stripe. That's only required, of course, if you're going to be offering your applications commercially. If you're just providing open source applications, then you don't need to follow the Stripe Connect flow at all. However, you can still set yourself up as an owner and set up your products. So Oqtane requires you to register some basic information about each product, basically the type of the product, what its name is, whether it has a logo or not. Package name is important because that would be your NuGet package name. That's the unique identifier that is used to identify your products. Once you've set up your products, you can define what type of license they're available under, either an open source license or a commercial license. You can also define where you provide support for your specific product, and that could be, via an open source channel like GitHub, or it could be through a custom forum, perhaps on your own website, or there is also an integrated support aspect that's part of the marketplace. And of course, you also have to specify, each release of your product, because each release is essentially, a new download that would be available with a new version number. And so you would provide all of your release information as well in the marketplace. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's this App Store capability. So if you're using the Oqtane framework and you're logged in, you can go to the module management area and you can actually see all of the products from the marketplace that are available, and you can download them directly into your framework immediately. And then, of course, you just have to restart the framework and they'll be installed automatically for you. So this App Store model, which most people are familiar with for their phones and desktops, is possible within the Oqtane framework. So that brings us, I guess, to the consumer user flows, right? Like, how do people acquire the products that are in the marketplace? And there's a bunch of different consumer user flows that had to be established for this marketplace. The first one, which is, of course, the most simple, is if you're offering open source modules available in the marketplace. These are going to be made available in the framework, and you can simply download them from the marketplace where you previously registered them. So that's a pretty simple flow. The marketplace also supports trial versions of commercial products. So if you have a commercial product and you want to make it available for download for a limited period of time so that someone can actually try it out before they purchase it, the marketplace supports that as well. And so basically this allows them to download the product, install it, utilize it, and then later activate it using the Oqtane marketplace licensing capability. The next one is for freemium products. So freemium products are, sort of their own classification of products, meaning they're commercial products, but they're available at no charge, meaning like they have zero price. But you still have to go through a standard sort of checkout process for them to purchase them. And so with premium products, you would go to the marketplace to do the checkout, then you'd be able to download the product to your local environment, and then you can activate that product using the licensing capability. And then the last one, of course, is where we get into some actual e-commerce, and this would be like your paid products. So with the paid products, of course, you go to checkout to the marketplace itself, and then you're going to be redirected to Stripe to actually do the actual purchase, because the marketplace doesn't do e-commerce itself. It delegates that responsibility to Stripe. So you'd go to Stripe, you'd enter your credit card information, You'd then be transferred back to the Oqtane Marketplace to let you know whether or not the purchase was successful. Behind the scenes, obviously, Stripe has a webhook, which is calling back to the marketplace, providing the necessary information about the purchase. Then you can download the product, and then you can activate the product using the licensing capabilities. So a lot of different flows here that have to be accounted for, and this is why building a marketplace is so complicated. Because you have to think about all of these different flows. This is an example of the commercial module listings that would be available within the Oqtane framework itself. So in this case, obviously, the commercial filter is chosen, and it's only going to show you the commercial products that are available. The checkout flow, this is the screen from the Oqtane Marketplace, actually from the sandbox, because the sandbox allows you to purchase things without using your own credit card, right? You can use a simulated, I guess, credit card to be able to simulate the full checkout experience by being transferred to Stripe, making the purchase, being transferred back, and it simulates like the full flow without actually having to make an actual payment on your credit card. So this is what obviously the Stripe payment screen looks like once you've been transferred over to Stripe, and it captures your credit card information, your order summary once you're done your order. The license activation, which I mentioned earlier, this would be once you've installed the product into your Oqtane installation. If the product is not licensed yet, it will tell you that it's not licensed, and it'll give you the ability to activate the license. There's a couple ways you could do that. You can fetch a license, which is sort of an automated way where it'll call the Oqtane Marketplace and get the license for you, or you can enter a license key if it's been provided to you, and you can validate it locally. So these would be to handle different environments, for example, environments that are connected and would have the ability to call the marketplace, and environments which are not connected to the internet. There are some parameters you can use to test the licensing capabilities while you're developing. And so this basically kind of shows you that for an individual product, a license file, which is just a simple text file, will be installed into your bin folder. That license file has a license key, which is generated by the Oqtane Marketplace. And there's also a licensing interface if you want to build your own licensing server. So like I said earlier, there's a default licensing capability that's provided by the marketplace. So it has an implementation of this iLicense server interface. However, you can build your own as well. And then you would just bundle your own license server with your own commercial products, and the licensing would still work using the same licensing component. So the user interface would still be consistent. Like I said, also there's an integrated support capability so that if someone is in the Oqtane framework installation, they might be having a problem with a specific product, they can click on a help button related to the product, and it will transport them to the support dashboard. It will already know what the product name is, it'll already know what the product version is, and then you can enter the support tickets. The owner of that particular product will be notified, and you'll be able to follow sort of a help desk flow. And I think the last thing that I wanted to mention is, outside of like the typical products that you would like downloadable sort of IP, right, which would be things like modules or themes or translations, there's often the need for module vendors to be able to provide paid consulting services to their clients as well. And so in this case, there is also the ability to create a product in the marketplace called a project. And for the project, you define the client's name and what the project is for and an amount. And this provides you with an alternative payment mechanism to basically collect payments, invoices from your consulting clients as well. And and this is maybe not so important for people who are based in the United States, but if you're a vendor that's providing service maybe in another area of the world, but you want to provide like a simple way for them to be able to pay your invoices by credit card, this could provide that for you. All right, so that's a lot of slides, but I want to jump over to a demonstration now.
Yeah,
so
as you were going through that, and
yep.
I was just like, oh yeah, and I'm like, it's just going off in my head. I'm like, there's so many things that are important as you're trying to create a marketplace, because essentially, like, you're creating a business for businesses. You know what I mean? You're creating a space for businesses to do business on top of, and like you said, things like licensing and paying out, generating 1099s, like even the infrastructure and the publishing and the search functionality inside of the website. Like, there's just so many things that have to go into place. So I could tell that you put a lot of thought into this, and this is not like a small thing. Like, this is a huge project that you're sharing with us right now.
Yeah, it has definitely, and this is why it's taken multiple years, right, to sort of get to this point. And it sort of happened in evolutionary stages, right? The ability to download and install open source extensions into the platform, that happened pretty early on, because that's obviously a pretty simple kind of a user flow. And then you have to like think about taking it up a notch, right? And providing sort of that commercial aspect. It takes it sort of to a whole other level.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a installation of Oqtane. So this is just using the standard code that's available in the Oqtane repo on GitHub. Mm-hmm. So this would be using the latest code from the dev branch. I've already installed this, so I've already got a connection string here, but it's got an installation wizard, so it's very easy to install Oqtane. So, this is the default sort of template that's created for an Oqtane site. If I go into my module management area, like I explained before, and I say I want to install a module, I can see that there's a number of different modules that are available. These are the open source modules by default. And if I click over to commercial, I can see that there's some commercial modules available as well. This is obviously connected to the production marketplace at this point. So I don't want to be actually pointing at the commercial marketplace for the purposes of this demo. So I'm going to go into my app settings.json, and I'm going to change this to point at the sandbox, which was what I mentioned when I was doing the slide presentation. So with that, now I'm going to relaunch the Oqtane framework, and we'll actually verify that when we go to the module management area now, we don't have any open source modules, and we have, I think, a couple of commercial ones. So we're pointing at the sandbox now. All right, so what I want to do is I'll pretend like I'm a developer, and I want to build some kind of a application and make it available within the Oqtane marketplace. So the way that you would do that typically with Oqtane is you would just want to scaffold a new module. And so I can go in here and I can just say create module. All right, so I'm going to say that this module is owned by DevEssence, and we're just going to call it, say it's a podcast module, right? So a module for managing podcasts. I'm going to use the default module template. I'm going to use the latest version, production version that's available, and it tells me it's going to generate all of the code in this location here. All right, so I'm going to create the module. All right, so it created the source code for the module, and now I've got to go and open that in Visual Studio. So here's my folder that it created, devessence.module.hubcast. So I can open this, and you can see it created all of the code for a fully functional module, and it used like templating to substitute like the names for me. So it used my the owner name that I provided and the module name that I provided. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to, I have to do a little trick here, which I'll explain in a minute, but this copy local lock file assemblies is an attribute that very few people ever use.
I don't
But
think
it
I've even
based
ever seen it before, to be honest.
okay, yeah, it's kind of an obscure one. Basically, what this does is when you compile a project, this attribute tells it to extract the assemblies from the NuGet packages that are referenced and put them in the local bin folder for you. And this is important with Oqtane because when I go to package this module as a Blazor class library, I'm going to want to include some of these assemblies within this module, right? So that it's functional. And so how do I get those assemblies? I use this attribute, right? So that these assemblies are copied to my bin folder so that they're in a location that I can easily locate them. All right, we're also going to go to NuGet, and we're going to browse for the Oqtane.licensing. And I'm going to install this into my client project. So whatever the latest version is. All right.
And as you're doing this, I'm wondering, do you have .NET templates, like .NET new templates that like set up some of the stuff for you, or
so
not?
that the templating is what I just showed you. It so there's no CLI. You actually do it through the framework itself. So you,
Okay, so you
go
go
in there,
into like the browser and you do it, and then that's how it
yeah,
generates it? Got it.
generates all this code for you. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so I've added the licensing, and so I want to go in and I'll just take my index, which is my sort of main user interface view, and I will say using Oqtane.licensing. Whoops. Which it will recognize in a minute. And I've also included some code here so I don't have to fumble through it. But so the licensing code here, the license view that I showed earlier in the slide. So I'm going to just stick this in to this module. And I'm going to put my actual content within the license portion because that's, this is the content I want to show only if it's licensed. This parameter that's passed basically is the framework provides this through the state that's available at runtime from the module, so it knows what the package name of the module is. I could hard code that if I wanted to, but it's just nicer to make it dynamic. So the next thing I need to do is I have this package project, and there's a few things I don't want to do here, but so it has this debug.cmd file, which is scaffolded for you automatically. And you can see all it does, it's a post-build command file that's executed if I was to build this module, and it would copy all of these assemblies over to my Oqtane framework so that they go in the bin and they are available to Oqtane. I don't actually want to do that in this case. So I don't want to actually copy it over. Similarly, there's a release. So if I compile in release configuration, it's going to xcopy over the NuGet package. I don't want to do that in this case because if it's installed already, then it just won't work with the flow from the marketplace because it thinks it's already installed. I also need to adjust my new spec because I need to include the Oqtane.licensing assemblies. And so I can take that and I can just add those into my new spec file. All right. And with that, if I shift over to release mode and I build my solution, it built everything and it created a NuGet package. So if I take a look in the folder, the package folder, it created a devessence.module.podcast new NuGet file. And if we open that file, we would see it contains all of the DLLs, also the PDB files that are part of it, and it includes my licensing DLLs as well. All right. So at that point, now I have a module that I want to make available on the marketplace. So I'm going to move over to the sandbox.
And then while you're doing that really quickly, we're gonna let that load for a second. We did have a question come in from YouTube, and
Okay.
Dan Siegel was asking, so curious, does Octane prevent sandbox use in a production environment? Like if I deploy to Azure, what would just stop me from using the sandbox?
It doesn't prevent, yeah, because it's up to you how you configure your app settings. So if you, for whatever reason, as the host user, right? Like obviously, not everyone has the ability to make changes to the app settings.json file. Thank goodness for that. But if you wanted to set your production site to point at the sandbox, you could. I mean, it's not going to prevent you from doing that. I don't know why you would do that. But yeah, I mean, the configuration of all this stuff is up to you. Octane doesn't prevent you from pointing into different places, right? You can point it at production, or you could point it at sandbox. It's up to you.
Yeah, I guess it's just.
Or maybe I'm missing the question.
Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of how stable or not, like you want your production environment to be. I think at that point, because
I see what you're saying. So there is okay. I understand the question now. So let me show you something here. So if we go into run the local version of Octane, which pretend this was production. If you go into the system info area, you have this options tab, package manager. So this is where you can specify, production or sandbox, or you can just remove this altogether. If remove it, then there is no package manager and you can't install anything. And so maybe if you had a production environment and you didn't want the ability, because remember, like only very specific users have the ability to install things into Octane, right? You have to be like the host user of your environment, right? Typically, you don't give out those privileges to just anyone. And so, but again, like if you want to prevent yourself from installing extensions in production, you can just remove the package manager, and then you will not be able to install extensions into that environment. I think that answers the question, right?
Yeah. Hold on one second. So Dan had a reply, says, maybe I'm missing something. I think like if I'm trying to test things and set up a module and bypass the license, wouldn't I just use the sandbox? So I'm guessing he's pretty much just saying like, if I use the sandbox and I build stuff, would that like circumvent any licensing?
It does not. Okay, yeah. So that's a good question. But so if you use the sandbox and you purchase a product that's available in the sandbox, and let's say you're purchasing that product from your production environment, the license that is generated, because it recognizes that it's a sandbox product, is only valid for 7 days. So even if you're using that product in production, that license that's generated is only valid for 7 days. And so that kind of limits the ability to kind of circumvent the licensing.
Yeah. So Dan, hopefully that answers your question. And then I'm also sure too, like if there's some DevOpsy things happening there as well, right? You know what I mean? I'm sure you could always implement things like, toggles,
you could
flags, and like all these different things as well, because you might have a reason that you want to, test in production, right? But then you probably want to, toggle it on and toggle it off, whatever you're using. So.
Yeah, so that's maybe another thing. So like obviously Octane has this app store type feel to it, right? Where you can interactively download and install products. However, not everyone wants to follow that approach. So in the Octane framework itself, in this Octane, well, it's actually in the, it would be in the www root folder, which every, of course, site would have. You have this packages folder, and you can drop NuGet packages into this packages folder. And then when the framework starts up, it recognizes that they're there, and it does, it installs them for you. So as part of a CI/CD pipeline, you can just copy files to a particular folder as part of your deployment, and basically deploy in that way, as opposed to using the interactive deployment method.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay.
Okay, so, all right, so we have the Oqtane sandbox. And like I said earlier, and if I wanted to list a product, I would go into submit product. I have some products here, but I'm going to say I want to create a new product. It's a module. And it was my podcast module that I created earlier. So we'll just call it podcast module. I'm not going to put a logo. Package name is important. So if I go back to where I was here and I find that podcast, so it created by default a package name, and you wouldn't include the version number. That's not really part of the actual package name. And product URL, I don't need to put anything specific, so I'll just put this. And sorry, I missed a step here, because obviously I'm logged in. I've already provided my owner information previously. I've already hooked myself up to Stripe, so that I have a valid Stripe Connect account. Anyways, so with that, this creates the product. All right, so it says I created the product. Please specify my license details and release. So I go into license, and I'm going to say that this is a commercial product. I'm going to load some default license terms, which are provided for me. And it basically substitutes my owner name and various things into the license for me. I'm going to use the integrated support service so that I can deal with support tickets on this site. I'm not going to provide a trial, and I'm going to use the integrated payment service as well. Oqtane also provides the ability, if you want to allow people to pay for stuff on their own site, like perhaps they have their own, e-commerce capability that they want to utilize as a vendor, they can link out to that if they want to.
Oh, wow.
Say it's $10. All right. And then, so that saved my commercial details, and then it created a license record for me. I can create multiple types of licenses if I want to. Like, you have all these options where you can specify whether it's a one-time license or a subscription. You've got different durations that you can have. You can specify how many active license activations are allowed. So there's a lot of functionality in here.
So a question I had for you, because this looks amazing, right? And again, like I said, it shows you really thought about literally everything. Like, every time I'm like, oh, I have a question, I'm like, oh, okay, Shaun already showed that. I don't have to talk about it. What types of extensions and modules do you imagine folks would create for Oqtane? If I have an idea and I'm like, oh wow, this marketplace thing looks really amazing, and I wanna be a part of what's happening here, right? I want to make use of this opportunity. What do I have to do? Like what kind of things do you think that would be great examples of modules for folks to build?
So it's interesting, right? If I go to store dot, let me see if I can find, I don't know the actual, all right. So obviously DNN is still around, and it has a lot of products. So these, literally, there's so many examples of things that people can use, right? Event planning, a news module, email, advanced email, I guess, right? A whole e-commerce platform that you can install on your website, document management, forms, analytics, PDF generator. There's no reason why any type of these types of products couldn't be built. Right. So there is a lot of examples of products out there. And this is just DNN. You could go to the WordPress plugin registry as well, right? And see a whole lot of things that people have built that other people are interested in installing as far as functionality into their website. Yeah, because there's already I guess that's one of the things. There's a lot of other platforms that are out there, right, which provide sort of integrations of functionality into them, and so there's like no limit to like the examples you can find. So it's pretty easy to figure out like what people might be interested in.
Yeah, and then you're showing some really great ones here too. And as I'm personally thinking about it, I can imagine something like, like an appointment scheduler, or something to manage inventory, or maybe something to manage your Stripe account, right? Because you're talking about using Stripe there, right? Like there's just so many...
absolutely. Yeah, you could have a Stripe marketplace that anyone could use, right, to sell products on their own site. Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of, because I know Stripe has certain restrictions with how businesses interact with each other, right? And how payouts happen and stuff like that. If I'm a module developer, right, and I want to be a part of this world from a business perspective, like what are the things that you need me to do? Like, what do I have to set up? Do I have to be a particular type of business? Can I be in any type of country? Do you support different types of currencies? Like what are the things as a business person do I have to do?
That's a good question. I think it's a leading question. Just kidding. No, so Stripe. So I didn't have a whole lot of familiarity with Stripe until the last year or so, in terms of what like the breadth of capabilities that it provides. But Stripe Connect supports like almost every country in the world. And it has an onboarding experience that you can go through for your particular country, where it deals with figuring out like which banks would be appropriate for the country you live in, figuring out how to do currency exchange. And so that's an amazing thing, because it's not something I as a developer have to worry about, right? Stripe is taking care of that for me, and I think that's amazing. But they literally, like, you don't have to be a US-based vendor to utilize the Oqtane Marketplace. You could be a vendor in any supported country by Stripe, and there's, I don't know, like it's a huge list of countries all over the world that are supported. There, in fact, there's very few countries that are not supported. It would only be the ones where there's economic sanctions against them.
So then it's pretty safe to say that like you have pretty good coverage across like the different folks that you could support and the different people that can build modules. Because so Shaun, so you're in the United States, right? There's a huge .NET community in India, and there's a huge .NET community in Europe. Like, so all of these folks have opportunities to build stuff inside of Oqtane. And you're doing all of that through Stripe Connect, right? Like the tool.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. And like I said earlier, I mean, originally I wanted, like I did the research and I decided on Stripe because of just the payment flow, right? I wanted to not be responsible for handling credit card information, right? That there's too much difficulty now, and too many sort of regulatory bodies that make it difficult to do e-commerce on your own, that I wanted to use a trusted partner. But then I discovered that Stripe Connect existed, and then it was like, oh wow, the light bulb went on. I'm like, this is going to make my marketplace like so much more capable in terms of its reach, right? Like to folks around the world, and it's going to simplify my administration a lot. And I know I sound like an advertisement for Stripe today, but like literally, it has saved me so much time.
Well, I think so. This is a technology conversation, but I think it's also a conversation about business. And one of the reasons why in the beginning I wanted to just kind of get your perspective, because I know you've done this before, right? Like you've built marketplaces before. You've had businesses around .NET that have been successful before. So being able to kind of understand what are some of the things you need and the tools you use and how you think about putting the packages together, I think are really interesting. And I even remember when you were showing your graph and you showed us a bit where, there was Stripe at the bottom, but then there's also like the GitHub plugin to it too, right? So it's not just like you're taking different things together, right? And you're just like, okay, well, I don't want to build this. I'm going to grab a component. I don't want to build this. I'm going to grab a service, right? And
Right.
and you're good at what you do, and you let other people be good at what they do, and then now you can compose a service that you could be successful with, that you could create a business around. And again, like I keep wanting to push this because in the .NET ecosystem, we don't see a lot of this. This is not like a commonplace scenario, right? And I really want to highlight it. I really want to use you not as a guinea pig, but as an example of someone that does it really well, right? And someone that's done it multiple times, right? And I think it's great if we see more people kind of going down that route. And again, like not just it's fine to be a developer, it's good to be an engineer or an architect and all kind of stuff, but like we can have .NET entrepreneurs, we can have .NET businesses, right?
Absolutely.
We just
Yep.
have to build them, right? And there's nothing stopping us from doing so. And again,
Yeah,
like
and I think
putting all the pieces together.
what's been stopping people maybe is there's not enough enablers, right, that are available in the .NET ecosystem to make it easy for people to sort of onboard themselves, right, as a vendor, a product vendor, right? It's the barrier to entry is pretty high, unfortunately, and so something like this lowers that barrier to entry a lot and makes it more accessible to everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've seen Octane.net, right? We've seen the sandbox. You showed us a little bit about how we could kind of put, scaffold out projects using like the UI.
Yep.
What's next for this project? Like, what else do you have? I don't know if you can tell us, because I know there might be some
Wow.
things under covers you don't want to talk about. But is there
No,
anything that
no.
you can share that what?
So like on the Oqtane Marketplace side, I've already been thinking about things like affiliate program, right? So that you could, people could promote the marketplace or even specific products in the marketplace by attaching an affiliate ID so that they could obtain, some monetary benefit by promoting it. And then like if they are responsible for the sale of a product, right, they can get the benefit of it through some compensation. So, and that's not too difficult to add, again, because of Stripe Connect. I was also thinking about not so much for the marketplace, well, maybe for the marketplace, but and the question that the person asked earlier touched on it is, where NuGet has the ability to have private feeds. So maybe you have a curated list of products that you trust, that work well, and you might want to only provide that list to be available within the Oqtane installation for your environment. I think that should be a possibility. And so I was thinking about sort of the technical implementation of how to do that, and I don't think that's too difficult either. From an Oqtane perspective itself, .NET 8 is going to be the focus within the next couple of months, right, is upgrading and then figuring out how to take advantage of some of the new capabilities like the new server-side rendering and rendering streaming models. Because Oqtane already supports like Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly and Blazor Hybrid. It would be great if it could support the newer things that are coming in .NET 8 as well. And so that's, I think, where some of the focus is going to be in the coming months.
So you just mentioned .NET 8 is coming up pretty soon. We're in September now, right? So, .NET releases every November. What are some of the things, like 2 or 3 things that you're really excited about in seeing in .NET 8?
Well, I am excited about all the things Blazor, of course, because I think that this is a very significant Blazor release. I'm not saying that the previous ones weren't, but this one seems to have a lot of interesting capabilities that are part of it that developers seem to be really excited about, right? The ability to, kind of blend the benefits of both server-side and single-page application models in sort of a nice unified way. I think that is going to be a real killer combination. And I also see it's almost like the tipping point for Blazor in a sense, with some of the by catering to the server-side crowd through server-side rendering, it definitely has this feel as if going forward, the emphasis is going to be on Blazor and not so much on MVC. And I probably shouldn't say that, but that's just what is the feeling that I'm getting. It's like Blazor's reached a tipping point in terms of maturity. This is the future. Get on board, right? Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
It's funny you said that because, and for folks that are watching, I have no insider information, but I had that thought the other day because with the Blazor United, I think that's what they're calling it, or Blazor Unified, like the single.
Yeah, I think the naming is still a bit of a mess.
But I'm looking at it and I'm just like, okay, well, if I have this, why do I need this other stuff, right? Because we have the MVC model, we have the Razor Pages model, now we have the Blazor model, right? And Blazor's come full circle versus just being Blazor in the browser. It's Blazor server side, right? And so do we need all of these options? I don't know, maybe not, right? So I think it's an interesting thing to pay attention to and watch as this .NET story kind of continues to evolve, to be honest.
Yeah.
But folks, if you're watching, like, we'd love to know what you think. Let us know what you think about .NET 8 and about the new stuff that's coming on. Let us know what you think about this Oqtane Marketplace. I'm super excited about it. I've never created an Oqtane module before, but I mean, if Shaun's going to pay me to do it, like maybe I need to start paying attention now, right? But all in all, I just think this is, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, I think this is a really good example of using .NET, using your skills and your talents and creating businesses and opportunities, not just for yourself, but for other people in the community. And so, Shaun, definitely appreciate you coming on to talk about it, coming on and sharing this stuff with us. Definitely love to have you come back on again in a couple months. Love to kind of see where things have gone and the new features that you put up. And
okay.
Yeah, thank you again, man. I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate being on the show. It's on the show once previously, and I appreciate the content that you guys provide. It's great. So I'd always welcome being the chance to come back again.
Sure, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Shaun. Thank all of you that are here that have been hanging out with us today. This has been another episode of Inside.NET, and today we learned about the Oqtane Marketplace. All right, take care.